The funeral home's parking lot was still full of cars when my phone buzzed. I ignored it. People had been texting condolences all day, and I couldn't handle another sorry for your loss while standing next to my husband's fresh grave. But the buzzing continued. 3 calls, 5, 7. Finally, my sister Janet grabbed my arm. Helen, you need to look at your phone. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Yamamoto. 17 missed calls. I called her back with trembling fingers. Helen, thank God, she breathed. I didn't want to disturb you at Frank's funeral, but your daughter is here with a locksmith. They're changing all your locks. The ground tilted. What? Jessica. She has a moving truck. She's putting things on the lawn. Your things. I asked what she was doing, and she said you don't live there anymore. I handed the phone to Janet, unable to speak. My daughter, my only child, was locking me out of my home while I buried her father. The drive home took 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. Janet drove while I sat frozen, watching familiar streets blur past. Frank was dead 5 days, and Jessica was already. Maybe it's a misunderstanding, Janet offered weakly, but we both knew better. Jessica had shown her true colors the day Frank was diagnosed with cancer. How long does he have? She asked an oncologist, not can he be cured? Or what are the treatment options? Just a cold calculation of timeline. When we pulled up to the house, my house, Jessica stood on the porch like a queen surveying her kingdom. New locks gleamed on the door. My mother's rocking chair sat forlornly on the lawn next to boxes marked Helen's junk and Jessica's neat handwriting. You're early, she said, not even pretending to show grief. I thought the reception would last longer. Jessica. My voice came out strangled. What are you doing? She descended the porch steps slowly, savoring the moment. At 35, she looked like Frank, same sharp features, same calculating eyes. But Frank had warmth behind his gaze. Jessica had only ice. I'm claiming my inheritance, she announced. Dad left me everything. The house, the accounts, the investments, everything. That's not. Frank wouldn't? Oh, what he did. She produced a document with a flourish. His will, signed last month when you were at your book club. Witnessed by his nurses. Legal and binding. I took the paper with numb fingers. There it was, Frank's shaky signature leaving everything to my beloved daughter, Jessica Marie Patterson. You poisoned him against me, I whispered. I told him the truth, Jessica smirked. That you only married him for his money. A 60-year-old woman marrying a wealthy 70-year-old. Please, the whole town knows you're a gold digger. I was with your father for 15 years. 15 years of waiting for him to die. She turned to Janet. Aunt Janet, you should take her. She's not welcome here anymore. Dad's house deserves better than a calculating widow. Mrs. Yamamoto watched from her garden, foam in hand. Other neighbors peered through curtains. Jessica had staged this for maximum humiliation. The grieving widow, locked out and homeless, revealed as the gold digger everyone suspected. Get your things off my lawn, Jessica continued. You have 1 hour before I call the police for trespassing. I looked at the house where I'd lived for 23 years. Not 15, 23. The house where I'd raised Jessica after my first husband died. The house Frank had moved into when we married because he said it felt more like home than his bachelor condo ever had. 1 hour, Jessica repeated, already turning back to the door. Find somewhere else to live, you gold digger. I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I laughed. Not hysteria, not tears. Just a short, sharp laugh that made Jessica freeze mid-step. You're right, I said calmly. I should go. Janet, would you mind dragging me to the Marriott? I'll need a room for tonight. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She'd expected tears, begging, a scene. Not calm acceptance. That's it, she demanded. No fighting? No protests? Why would I fight? I picked up one small box, photo albums, the only things that mattered. You have Frank's will. The house is yours. Congratulations. Something flickered in her eyes, confusion, maybe even disappointment. She'd wanted drama, and I wasn't providing it. Don't forget this. She tossed my purse onto the lawn. Dad canceled your credit cards yesterday. Changed the bank accounts too. Hope you saved some of that gold you were digging for. I picked up my purse with dignity I didn't feel. Thank you for letting me know. Janet drove me away while Jessica stood on the porch, clearly unsettled by my reaction. In the rearview mirror, I watched my daughter-in-law, no, ex-daughter-in-law, take possession of what she thought was her prize. At the Marriott, I paid for a room with my personal credit card, the one Frank never knew about, linked to my separate account. Janet hovered, wringing her hands. Helen, this is insane. We need to contact a lawyer, contest the will. Frank wasn't in his right mind. Frank was completely lucid, I said, unpacking my photos. The cancer hadn't reached his brain. He knew what he was doing. Then why? Because Jessica convinced him I was a gold digger. She's very persuasive when she wants something. I smiled at a photo of Frank and me at Niagara Falls. She gets that from him. You're being too calm about this. Am I? I pulled out my phone. Excuse me, Janet. I need to make a call. She left reluctantly. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Morrison, Krensky and Associates. The receptionist answered. Hi, Brenda. It's Helen Winters. Is Paul available? Mrs. Winters. I'm so sorry about Frank. Let me put you right through. Paul Morrison had been my lawyer for 30 years since my first husband died. He handled that estate, my mother's estate, and various property matters over the years. Helen, his warm voice filled the line. I've been expecting your call. How are you holding up? About as well as expected. I assume you heard what happened. Small town, word travels. Jessica locked you out. Changed the locks while I was at the funeral. She has Frank's will leaving her everything. Paul was quiet for a moment. Helen, forgive me for asking, but you seem remarkably calm about this. Should I be panicking? Well, no, but most people would be. Most people didn't inherit their house from their mother before they were married. I smiled at the silence that followed. You did tell me to keep the deed in my maiden name for tax purposes, remember. Paul's laughter boomed through the phone. Helen Winters, you magnificent woman. The house is mine. Has been for 23 years. Frank's name was never on it. I sat on the hotel bed, finally allowing myself to feel the exhaustion. Jessica just stole a house that was never Frank's to give. She changed the locks on your house. That's breaking and entering. Trespassing. Possibly fraud if she knowingly. She didn't know, I interrupted. Neither did Frank. He always called it our house or his house. I never corrected him. It didn't matter when he was alive. But it matters now. Yes, it matters now. We discussed next steps, legal notices, sheriff involvement, eviction procedures, the clean simplicity of property law versus the messy complexity of family betrayal. I can have her out tomorrow, Paul promised. The sheriff takes illegal eviction seriously, especially when it involves a widow. Give me tonight, I said. Let her sleep in my bed. Eat breakfast at my table. Feel like she won. Helen. I bury my husband today, Paul. The man I loved, yes, loved, despite what everyone thinks. Let me grieve tonight. Tomorrow we can deal with Jessica. That night, alone in a hotel room, I finally cried. Not for the house or the money or the public humiliation. I cried for Frank, who died believing I only wanted his wealth. I cried for Jessica, who'd become someone I didn't recognize. I cried for the family we'd been before greed poisoned everything. Frank and I had met at a grief support group. I'd lost my first husband, he'd lost his wife. We bonded over shared pain, late-night conversations, the strange guilt of finding love again. When we married, people whispered, the young widow and the wealthy widower. Gold digger, they said. Trophy wife. As if two broken people couldn't simply fall in love. Jessica had been 20 when we married. She'd smiled at the wedding, called me mom, seemed happy her father had found companionship. When had that changed? When had love turned to suspicion, family to transaction? The next morning arrived with mountain sunshine and a sense of purpose. I dressed carefully, not in funeral black, but in my favorite blue dress. War paint, Frank would have called it. He'd love me in blue. Paul met me at the courthouse where we filed the necessary paperwork. By 10 a.m., Sheriff Martinez and 2 deputies were knocking on my door, with Jessica's shiny new locks. I waited in the sheriff's car, watching through the window as Jessica answered in a silk robe I recognized as mine. Her face went from smug to shocked to furious as Sheriff Martinez explained the situation. That's impossible. Her voice carried across the lawn. This is my house. My father left it to me. Ma'am, I have the deed right here. This house belongs to Helen Winters, not Frank Patterson. You're trespassing. She's lying. She must have forged. The deed is 23 years old, ma'am. Filed with the county when Mrs. Winters inherited from her mother. Your father's name appears nowhere on it. Jessica's face crumbled. She'd been so sure, so confident in her victory. She hadn't done her homework, hadn't checked the simplest detail. She'd assumed, like everyone else, that Frank owned everything. I want to see it, she demanded. Sheriff Martinez handed her the deed. I watched her scan it, her face growing paler with each line. Helen Marie Winters, single owner, inherited from Dorothy Marie Winters, recorded 1999. No, she whispered. Then louder, no, this isn't right. Dad said. Your father can't give away what he doesn't own, the sheriff said firmly. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and vacate the premises. My belongings? Everything here is mine. Dad left me everything. Everything he owned, Paul interjected, appearing beside the car. Which didn't include this house, or anything in it that belonged to Mrs. Winters before the marriage. The next hour was excruciating. Jessica raged, pleaded, threatened. She called lawyers who told her the same thing: you can't inherit what was never there to inherit. She tried calling Frank's attorney, who confirmed that Frank's will was valid but only covered Frank's actual assets. Which are what? Jessica demanded over speakerphone. The investment accounts, the retirement funds, his vehicle, personal effects, the lawyer listed. Approximately $800,000 in total assets. That's all. Jessica's voice cracked. But the house alone is worth. The house wasn't his, Ms. Patterson. I advised him years ago to have Mrs. Winters add him to the deed, but he said it didn't matter. He trusted his wife. Trusted his wife. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Finally, Jessica emerged with 2 suitcases in her purse. Nothing else. Sheriff Martinez checked her bags. My jewelry wasn't there, thankfully. She'd already moved it somewhere, probably. Another battle for another day. This isn't over, she hissed as she passed me. I'll contest Grandma Dorothy's will. I'll prove you manipulated her too. Your great-grandmother Dorothy died when you were 12, I said quietly. You spoke at her funeral about how much you loved visiting her house. This house. You baked cookies in her kitchen. Planted roses in her garden. Jessica faltered. Memory flickered in her eyes. Summer afternoons with great-grandma Dot, learning to crochet in the front parlor, picking blackberries for jam. I'll destroy you, she said, but the venom had drained away. Everyone knows what you are. A woman who loved your father and lost him twice, once to cancer and once to your lies. I stood straighter. Yes, I suppose everyone does know that now. She fled then, tires squealing like her pain. I stood on my porch, and watched her go. Mrs. Yamamoto came over with tea and sympathy. Other neighbors followed, admitting they'd never believed the gold digger rumors, that Frank and I had seemed genuinely happy. Inside, the house felt different. Jessica had moved things, claimed spaces, left her mark. But underneath, it was still my mother's house, my house, the home where I grieved one husband and loved another. I found the rocking chair she dragged to the lawn and returned it to its spot by the window. Mom's chair, where she'd rocked baby Jessica during visits, where Frank had spent his last good days reading newspapers and complaining about politicians. The lock company came that afternoon, the same one Jessica had used, amused by the irony. New locks, new keys, new beginning. That evening, Paul called with an update. Jessica's been busy. She's already claimed Frank's accounts, filed the will for probate. She'll get what Frank left her, minus taxes and fees. Good, I said, surprising him. Frank wanted her to have it. Helen, you could fight this. Undue influence, his mental state. No, I was firm. Frank made his choice. He believed her over me. That hurts more than losing money ever could. What about Jessica? She committed fraud, trespassing. She's grieving, I said, though I wondered if that was true. She lost her father and her scheme on the same day. That's punishment enough. Paul disagreed, but I held firm. No charges, no lawsuits, just boundaries. Jessica tried, of course. She called, texted, showed up at the door. First with demands and bargaining, finally pleading. I didn't answer. The woman who'd locked me out while I buried her father had forfeited the right to my attention. A month later, Frank's lawyer contacted me. There was a letter, he said. written by Frank to be delivered after the will was executed. I met him at his office, hands shaking as I opened the envelope. My dearest Helen, it began in Frank's careful script. If you're reading this, then Jessica has finally shown you her true colors. The rune spun. I gripped the letter tighter. I know what she's been telling me. I know she thinks you married me for money. I've let her believe I agree, even changed my will to convince her. But Helen, my love, I need you to know, I never doubted you. Not for a moment. Jessica has become someone I don't recognize. Greedy, calculating, cruel. She reminds me of my brother, the one who contested Mom's will, remember? I couldn't bear to die knowing she'd torture you with legal battles. So I gave her what she wanted, knowing it wouldn't include what really mattered. The house was always yours. I was just grateful you let me share it. 800,000 should be enough for Jessica to either build a life or destroy herself. Either way, you'll be free of her. I'm sorry for the deception. Sorry for the pain this caused. But mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful you love me despite the gossip. Grateful for every morning I woke up in your mother's house, in your arms, in the life we built together. All my love. Frank. P.S. Check the attic. Behind the Christmas decorations. I left something for you. I cried in the lawyer's office, ugly sobs that 15 years of love deserved. Frank had known. Frank had chosen me, protected me, loved me enough to let his daughter hate him to save me from her greed. In the attic, behind boxes of ornaments, I found a smaller box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a deed. Not to the house, that was already mine. This was for a cabin in the mountains, the one we'd rented for our honeymoon, where we dreamed of retiring someday. For my gold digger, the note said, who dug deep enough to find my heart. The cabin was ours, mine now. Bought with money Frank had hidden from everyone, including Jessica. His final gift, his last laugh, his way of saying what the town gossipers couldn't understand. Sometimes love is just love, even when you're old, even when you're rich, even when the world insists it must be something else. I kept the letter but never showed it to Jessica. Let her believe her father died thinking I was a gold digger. Let her live with the consequences of her greed. Frank had given her enough rope to hang herself, and she tied the noose with her own hands. As for me, I live in my mother's house, rocks in her chair, tend the roses Jessica didn't even recognize as mine. On weekends, I drive to the mountain cabin where Frank's ashes rest on the mantle, where love doesn't need to be justified or explained. The neighbors still whisper sometimes. The widow who outsmarted the daughter. The gold digger who turned out to own the gold all along. Let them talk. They'll never understand what Frank and I knew, that the real treasure was never money or houses or things. It was the quiet mornings over coffee, the shared laughter over bad TV, the held hands during chemo treatments, the love that didn't care about bank accounts or property deeds or suspicious children. Jessica got her inheritance, every penny Frank wanted her to have. But she'll never inherit what mattered, the ability to trust, to love without calculation, to see people as more than walking bank accounts. I got my house back, but more importantly, I got the truth. Frank loved me enough to play a long game that protected me even from the grave. And if that makes me a gold digger, then I'll wear the title proudly, because I dug deep enough to find a love worth more than all the houses and bank accounts in the world, even if I had to lose it to prove it was real.